Hello, everyone. Nice to be here at the Cypress Conf, and I hope that many of you are joining this workshop and that you are going to be enjoying this session. And yeah, I will wait just one more minute to start, and after that, I will introduce myself, introduce EPAM, and also let you know what the topic is. So in the meantime, just waiting a little bit more so that any of you can join here. And I'm gonna make sure that during the session, I'm gonna be tapping in and out a couple times. So in case you have any questions, please send that into the Q&A panel so you can see it on the top right. I believe it should be on the top right corner for you. You can tap into the Q&A tab, and then that way you can post your questions, and I'm very happy to answer any of your questions, especially if they are related to the topic. Then I should be able to provide you some relevant answers as well. Okay, then yeah, the 1 minute has passed, so let me start this session. So I'm Péter Földházi, and I'm originally from Hungary, and I've been in the US for roughly 6.5 years now. And I've been working for EPAM systems for more than 13 years now. So they are the ones who brought me to the US, and since then I moved to consulting, and I'm always working for a different client. Sometimes I'm getting back to the same client after a couple of years, and I'm helping them leverage better QA practices, establish or improve their test automation practices, designing, building solutions. So, and right now I'm working on a Gen AI adoption program. So it's a little bit different than what I've been doing over the last 13 years, but it is tightly connected to it because it's all focused on QA and business analysis or like product management related work and how we can help them improve that. So as you can see, I have a huge background in QA, primarily in test automation. I used to be a test automation engineer. Most recent years, also picking up the Gen AI and how that can help me and others at work. A little bit about EPAM. So EPAM is a company that's been there since 1993, and in more than 50 different countries, we are providing software solutions, custom software solutions for our clients, and outsourcing engineering teams to these clients and providing technology and business consulting. So that's very shortly about myself and about EPAM. So let me hop into the what I'm going to be talking about today. And again, this is not just a presentation. This is a workshop. So of course, it's online, so it's very different when we meet in person, where I can see your faces, your reactions, but you do have the ability to react in chat messages and have your questions. So again, I want to highlight to make sure to post your questions during the course of this workshop, because I'm not going to just stop at the end to answer your questions. I'm going to stop a couple of times, 4 or 5 times during the course of this workshop to be able to answer any of your questions. And so what I'm going to be talking about and how this is driving the whole session is talking about the test pyramids first, and showing you how that can help you in advocating for quality. I'm going to be showing you an assessment approach that's based on what we've been doing at EPAM for a very long time now, and then how you can present the results in making sure that people are actually buying into what you are proposing to them, like how you can improve the quality assurance and quality engineering processes. So basically, I'm going to teach you how you can advocate for quality within your company. So first, and before really diving deeper into the first topic, so I want to highlight that I'm working as a quality architect, which is basically a QA consultant role. And for us at EPAM, we have a quality architecture school, which is a 7-month course or like series of courses for 7 months. And so any colleague who would like to become a quality architect and enters this school, they spend roughly like 5 to 10 hours 5 to 10 hours every week during these 7 months to become the QA consultants. So this is a 1 hour session. So obviously I'm not going to be able to teach you all of that we teach in the quality architecture school at EPAM. So I'm just cherry picking some concepts that I feel are going to be easy to explain and quick to explain during this session. And you would be able to reuse these concepts at your work. So the first one is the test pyramids. And I am assuming that some of you or many of you have heard about the terminology test pyramid. And this is, but I'm pretty sure there are some people who have not. And let me clarify what it is. So basically, the pyramid concept shows you that whatever you do on the bottom of the pyramid is going to be something that you can quickly implement earlier in the software life cycle, and it's going to be cheaper for you. The more you move up in the pyramid, it's going to be the opposite. So it's going to be costly, coming later in the life cycle. So the whole, and probably it's going to be running slower. Like if you think about UI tests compared to unit tests, like obviously unit tests are a fraction of a second. UI tests can, some of those individually can run for even several minutes, depending on how you describe the test case and how complex it is. So this is how the test pyramid helps you in being able to visualize where the different types of testing reside, and how you could make improvements in your current test distribution to have the shift left testing approach. Now, the original concept was called actually the test automation pyramid or agile test automation pyramid. And that was first created by Mike Cohn, a couple of years later by Jason Huggins, but they never knew of each other coming up with the exact same concept until a couple of years later. And this is a very simplified pyramid. You have the UI on the top, unit on the bottom, and in between the services layer. And I like to showcase it. So first of all, sometimes I just simply use the original pyramid because I think it's awesome. It's very easy to describe where the different types of automated testing reside. But I also like to slice up the service layer into three: the functional API, the contract testing, and component integration levels. The reason why I like to do that is because this way I can really dig deeper into some of these types that I feel usually help my clients a lot. And especially when you only talk about service level testing, and a couple of people ask, okay, is this where you have the API testing? Is this where you do integration testing? But if you slice it up into a couple more sub layers, it's a little bit easier to drive people through it. So the whole idea is that when you want to have a feedback about code, that's what you are checking on the unit level. If you want to have that really full end-to-end feedback, especially when it's an application that has a UI, it's important to highlight, then you would do it at the top. In between, you do need to have some component integration testing as well, because as you are integrating the smaller units to each other, then you have a smaller component that you can check if it's working correctly on its own. And you will be able to check what happens if I start integrating it to other components. And I can validate the contracts between different APIs, between different services. That's where the contract testing comes in. And based on my experience, most companies are unfortunately not leveraging the contract testing, even though they have API services. Of course, not every company has those. but those that have API services, they could have contracts between those APIs. And if you have a contract between those APIs, then you can also define contract types as well. Why it matters and why it's helpful is because usually if people don't do that, they start finding those issues on API or on UI level. So what happens, it might take a couple of days or more like a couple of weeks or months before you find these defects that originate from two APIs not properly communicating with each other. Let's say one of them is sending a payload where the date of birth is in a certain format, but the consumer is expecting it in another format, and then it's going to fail. If you are manually testing it at the end, or even if like you have a Cypress test that tests it on the UI, that's great. You still find a defect, awesome. But now the root cause analysis is going to take a little bit longer for you. So it's important to mix it up and have some kind of testing in all of the levels. Now, it's also important to highlight here that, of course, this is the ideal pyramid shape that a lot of people are telling that this is what you have to always aim for. I would say that that's not true. You don't always aim for it. Sometimes you might have bigger efforts on the UI level, and it's fine. It's always context dependent. But I will go into that a little bit deeper later. So that's like sometimes it happens that it's an inverted pyramid, so more efforts on the UI level, a little bit less on service level, and absolutely nothing or just a little bit on unit level. The typical problem with this approach is that you are spending a lot of time on testing and a lot of money as well on testing. And what happens is that you don't have confidence in the code quality here. So usually that's the biggest concern here. And it again, like as you have a lot of efforts on UI level, probably you are going to find most of the defects, but it's costing your organization a lot to get there and to do the root cause analysis. On the right side, in the hourglass shaped version, what happens is that, okay, you have confidence in the code level, you are also able to find most of the defects on the UI level, but it's again like really heavy on the manual testers, really heavy on the test automation engineers who are writing their Cypress tests here. So what you want to ensure is that you're not just using your test automation for catching issues on the UI, but also start introducing service level testing as long as the business logic is there on the service level. If it's there, then those API tests are going to run in like 2 or 3 seconds. If you have 200 such tests, it runs, the whole test suite is going to run for, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes, roughly 3 minutes. That's awesome because within 3 minutes, you are able to find a lot of defects or see if any change and regressed the current quality of the application. So that's why it's important to address when you see that there are no service levels at all. And then everything really goes south. It's called the umbrella-shaped pyramid or umbrella-shaped distribution, where the only thing that you do is UI testing, and that's going to be really painful for your whole team, not just for testers, but for the whole delivery team. And like obviously, when you see that this is the test distribution, your test strategy will become clear. You know exactly where you have to address the challenges. Okay, let me pause here a little bit and let me take a look at whether there are any questions. Okay, I see that there was only one question so far regarding the recording, so it will be shared. Great. Okay, then let me get back to the presentation and continue with the assessment approach. And so I talked about the pyramid first, and this is something that I will bring back later, and you will see why. Uh, but first, before that, I wanna go a little bit deeper with a very important topic, and this is going to be the bulk of this workshop. So when I start working with a new client, usually like before starting a project, I try to figure out like what's going on. It usually takes like one session to have that what we heard, like what are the pain points, details about their products and tech stack, and what are the goals, like business goals and delivery goals. So, and see why they are struggling. So this is something where I get to hear a story, and this is awesome because this is a way I can come up with a proposal and a recommendation and the proposal based on those recommendations, how we can help this company. So usually the reason why they reach out to us because they need help and they would like us to help them. So it's very important to quickly understand the situation and providing the right recommendations and proposals. Uh, After this, uh, the example here is going to be revolving around when a project assessment or a discovery is necessary. Sometimes it's if like I'm working with a client that we've been working with for so long that we really understand their company culture, their SDLC, their way of working, then we don't necessarily need an assessment to start with. But many times, especially if it's an absolutely new client, we need to have a deeper understanding of the current situation. Hearing the pain points and some of the challenges in one meeting, that's great, but that's not enough information and not enough data to be working with. So this is when I usually recommend to do 6 or 8 weeks of assessment, depending on how much data we need, and start analyzing the current state. And what happens is I start talking to different stakeholders, and that means not just C-suites and middle management, but the actual engineering teams as well. And that includes not just the developers and testers, but business analysts and so on. And I also start getting to their different tools such as Jira or Confluence or ADO. If they have ADO, then it's ADO. Start gathering information like how they are formulating their user stories, how they are creating their test cases based on that, how they are automating their tests after that. Also, it's very important to understand the number of defects that are coming in, the severity of those defects, whether the severity is driving the resolution time, and so on. Uh, and this way, I really understand where their real pain points are. Because it's one thing what they are seeing, and that's very important, of course, but the factual data is what's going to tell me where I need to really focus on. And it's going to help me create that test strategy that will drive the testing efforts and QA efforts in the long term. So, of course, I need to be providing that, presenting that. But before presenting, I like to do some POCs. Usually, what I have seen is that, like, if I set up a quick framework, and let's say so after doing the tool evaluation, seeing what's the right language and tools to use, what are they capable of using, then I would provide them a POC or a couple of POCs to show them what values these different solutions would bring, such as a test automation framework for UI testing or for contract testing or for leveraging AI agents and so on, how you can do that. Then I design what the future state will be. So the design is based on the analysis and the proof of concepts. This is how I'm able to show, because I have the factual data, I have solutions, and I can show that, hey, this is a small one. This is how it works. And this is how it will work in the long run. And these are the benefits of further building on top of it. or these are the benefits of addressing these type of defects with this and that type of approach. So that's how I can really tell what the future state will be and how we can get to that future state. And of course, after that, there needs to be a final report to present all of these findings, recommendations, and benefits. And typically, you would want to continue working. Sometimes, of course, that doesn't happen because it's not necessary, but usually there's a continuation of work. Okay, so that's very briefly about this concept, this 4I approach of assessment. Let me go on and go a little bit deeper with some of these different aspects. So before starting an assessment, we would have two calls. Like usually I would have two calls with my clients or prospective clients. And first, it's about what we heard. What's the current situation? And as I mentioned, we need to understand the pain points, but also like, okay, what are the different tools they are using, the languages, the different dev management tools that they are using, and so on. Then, based on the conversation and what we heard, we can provide recommendations, and that really needs to be clear on like what people need to be brought in, the timeline, and what's going to be done. And after that, you need to ensure that you have the exact timeline provided as well. So not just like, okay, it's for, let's say, for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but the exact timeline and what are going to be some of the major milestones. And that should include demo sessions and the final readout as well. You also need to have the goals of the assessment. Otherwise, it's a little bit easier to go sidetrack if you don't have a clear set of goals and a clear scope and a clear understanding of what needs to be delivered by the end and during the course and by the end of the assessment. Again, something that I should have mentioned at the very beginning, but I'm going to mention it now, is that you can see that I'm coming with an external consultant's mindset. So normally, or like usually, I'm helping my clients. I'm an external human being who comes in and tries to help them. Sometimes you may be a consultant who is actually already working for that company. So there's a so-called internal consultant as well. And the approach that I'm showing you right now can be the same and can be followed by internal consultants as well, or people who would like to become internal consultants. Of course, there are some differences because you are already there, so you understand the company culture better. Hopefully, you are well connected within the company and have good relationships and not bad relationships. So in that case, you should be able to better like go forward from some point of view. Of course, from other point of view, if you are an internal, sometimes they may be pushing you back with some of your requests a little bit better, like a little bit more, which makes it a little bit worse for you compared to being an external consultant. Because if I'm coming in, it's for a certain duration of time, so I need everything on time. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to deliver. So there's a little bit easier time for me to push for those things. And let me, again, very quickly take a look at whether there are any questions. And I see one question. Okay, let me read it out loud. Just a moment. Oh, actually, there are many other questions. So first, what do you do if you encounter resistance from the engineering teams or from management? If they, for example, don't think they have enough time or funds to write and maintain a UI test suite. Huh? Okay. Okay, so this is quite a typical thing. So absolutely relevant question. So usually I do encounter resistance almost every time. It's a natural thing. Um, how you can make sure that it doesn't happen or it's not as big of a resistance is all up to communication. This is something that I'm going to address at the end, but it's about building good relationships. So if you at the end provide a report where you are saying that the delivery teams are pretty bad and the only thing they do is generate bugs, and the testers are like don't quite junior, you don't even understand why they are like senior or lead engineers. If you start being like judgmental, or you say that the test automation solution is terrible, they're not going to like you. What happens is that maybe you get buy-in from the management, and especially from the C-suite, because they like see where the problems are. But then if you get a continuation, then engineering teams won't work together with you. So for that, what you have to ensure is that you are not saying anything that's judgmental. So you are not using the red language approach, but instead you are using the green language approach, which revolves around just stating factual data, just facts. Like you can say that, let's say there are 137 test cases, and out of those, 10 test cases are automated. You are not being judgmental here, but the message is clear that more tests could potentially be automated. So that kind of communication is one aspect. The other thing is, don't tell them that it's an audit. You're not doing an audit here, you're doing an assessment. Or if even the assessment could potentially drive people away, you can also say that you are doing a discovery. Discovery is about like what actually you are doing. You are trying to discover what's going on and where you can help them. So that's another thing. So it's all about, I think, the word usage, and also making sure that they understand that you are here to help them, not for replacing them or for pushing them out from their positions. And one more thing, don't think they have enough time. Oh, yeah. So if they don't think they have enough time or funds to write and maintain a UI test suite, again, here the POC helps. You can very quickly show like how much time you spent on it. And then, yeah, you can extrapolate from there, like how much it would take for them. Okay, next question. Despite having data and pain points documented, some orgs still prefer developers to manage their own testing. What alternative approaches could help shift this mindset? I think it's not necessarily bad if developers manage their own testing. It's fine. Like again, depends on the company culture and like what they are working on. Some companies don't even have testers, and it's fine for them. I think Wise is one of those companies where it's working, and but I also have seen examples where companies don't have testers and they are failing big time. The reason is because they don't know how to do proper quality assurance. They don't have any QA coaches or QA strategists. So the idea here is that as long as, again, first of all, you need to understand whether this is a company where not having dedicated testers is fine. Second, if that's true and it's okay not having a dedicated tester, then you still need people who can advocate for quality assurance. Because how do you ensure that when you are hiring developers, they know how to do testing? Second, who is going to mentor them in testing as well? It's not just about creating the product, but also how you can test it. And then that means that it's not just about unit testing, component integration, or contract testing. They need to be able to cover for all the other aspects as well, even manually. And I think this is where the biggest challenge is, that if you are writing your own code, you might not be providing the best testing efforts, because it's your little baby, it's some or little pet that you created and you are happy about it, and you don't see it from other perspectives. And that's where a dedicated tester is really useful to have, because then that person can actually take a look at it. They may not be nice, and they are going to say that, hey, there's a defect in what you just created, and that feels bad for you as a developer. But then you actually find the defect and be able to fix it. Okay, so I think that's the key here. If there's an org where they don't want to have the dedicated testing positions, you still need dedicated QA coaches and QA strategists. That's my recommendation here. I think these were the two questions for now. Okay, let me get back to the presentation. Okay, so when I start analyzing the current state and being able to paint the picture, I have a couple approaches for that, or we have a couple approaches for that. One is the questionnaire, second is the stakeholder interviews, and last is collecting hard data. For me, I really liked the middle approach a lot, that stakeholder interviews, because I like to talk. But then after a couple assessments, I realized that if I'm heavily reliant on stakeholder interviews, what happens is I'm spending a lot of time with each of these individuals, which is useful. I'm building connections and I'm understanding their struggles. But it's very time consuming and also a lot of energy, like consuming a lot of energy as well from you and from all the other people that are involved. So what I started doing later on is focusing a little bit more on hard data, still doing the stakeholder interviews, but much less than before. And I try to get accesses to the different systems and see, like, okay, the defect reports. Like one example, I had a client where they had within an 8-week period almost 5,000 defects reported. At the beginning, it was like, wow, that's huge. So let's dig deeper. What's going on? I was able to see that they are able to address only 30% of those every sprint. So basically, 70% of the defects are left unresolved. And what happens is that after a couple of months, they need to have 1 or 2 sprints, sometimes more, just focused on bug fixing. So just by looking into the defect reports, I was able to realize why they are late with their delivery, because they are generating so much traffic for the testers and for the developers that they cannot deliver the actual product in some of the sprints. Nothing at all, just the bug fixes. So that means that clearly something needs to change there. Okay, then let's take a look at other aspects as well. Where do the most critical defects come in? And I was able to see that more than half of the defects, the critical defects, were from an integration issue, and they didn't have any targeted testing for that, only like in-game testing, which is really costly because you have to get the build, deploy it locally, and then log in. And it's a really slow testing effort. Really effective as well on one hand, because you can find all the different types of issues. But then the integration testing is something that after I created a POC doing API testing, API test automation, basically the whole suite ran for, I think, 15 seconds. And all of these issues could be from that point onwards, could be detected by API tests that now can be triggered from the pipeline. So this is why collecting hard data is important, because that really tells the story that is going on with factual data, and it's something that if you take snapshots of this data, then you can provide it at the end of the report that, hey, on this day, these are the number of different defects, these are the distribution of severity of those defects, and the root causes for them. And it's amazing, because nobody can say that you're not right, because it's a fact that you are presenting. So it's not an argument anymore after that. So you can do the same with looking into the test cases, how they are creating it. If there are multiple testers, then it could be that the way of writing test cases differs from person to person. Maybe some people provide very detailed test cases, others just provide a one-liner, and it's impossible to automate those. So you can learn a lot from digging into these different aspects: test case definitions, test automation code. Do they follow any principles such as even like OOP principles or solid principles, and so on. The one thing that I didn't go deeply enough into is the questionnaire. This is something that's also pretty useful, especially if when you start the whole thing. You can send out a questionnaire, and basically you give freedom for the team or for the teams to fill it in as they like. It's all about like, hey, there are these different aspects, let's say 70 questions within test strategy, test automation, defect management, SDLC, and so on. And then they start providing you information. They sit down. Usually it takes 1.5, 2 hours to fill in that many questions, a question with that many different questions. And what happens is right at the beginning, you understand where you are. Of course, you still need to have the stakeholder interviews and the hard data to have a better picture, but this really helps guiding you where you should focus more at the beginning. And some of these examples, I think I already talked about, so I'm not going to go into details here. And for the questionnaire and for the stakeholder interviews, these are, again, some examples that you could have. Usually, like, you can approach it in a couple of different ways. Either you say that you focus on the people, like, let's say, the people that you are inviting to a certain stakeholder interview is, let's say, the testers, or like the manual testers, or a certain dev team, and so on. The other way you can approach it, and that's what I'm reflecting here, is areas that you are focusing on. So if I focus on test management, then these are some of the questions that I'm going to have. In the next session, I'm going to focus on defect management. Again, who am I going to invite? Probably I'm going to invite the QA director, if there's any QA director, a test manager, and maybe some of the engineers as well, such as the team leader of the testers. So here, what happens is at the end, you have, again, like, you have an understanding of what their practices are for the different areas. And you could even do it in a way that you can provide a maturity scoring behind the different areas. And this way you see how mature they are overall in their QA practices. Previously mentioned the green language and red language. So once you collected all the different data from the questionnaire, stakeholder interviews, and the hard data sources, then you can provide your findings. So you have some findings, right? You're seeing some trends, or like some templates. And then once you have those findings, you can tie some recommendations into them. Like, based on what you found, this is what you are recommending. But purely just showing what you recommend, such as, let's say, build a test automation framework, or improve it by adding reporting, or maybe like addressing a certain level of missing certain test level, and how you would address that. It's great. It's important. That's driving your proposal, and that's driving your strategy. But then you also need the benefits. I have an example where I conducted an assessment for a financial company, and the person who was funding the whole assessment was an SVP of architecture. So when we had the midpoint check-in, and I was presenting what we've found so far, our focus was that, okay, let's go really technical. This is a guy who's an SVP of solution architecture or like enterprise architecture. Like he must be really technical. He probably wants to look into those things. So it was all diagrams and really going into the different microservices. And then halfway through that meeting, he stopped me and told me, like, hey, why are you showing this to me? I don't see any dollar numbers, anything like why I should be even considering you to continue this assessment. And we're like really surprised and really shocked. But then we discussed, okay, let's revisit it a week from now. So what we did is provide instead the benefits of what we recommend and how it's gonna save them dollars or time, make them quicker or have better quality. And we provided these details a week later, and then we got the nod to continue the assessment. So that was a good learning lesson for me that, of course, the different level of stakeholders are going to be interested in different aspects. So you need to know your audience, and especially like someone who is going to be paying for this is probably going to be a C-suite or C-level person. So you need to bring those dollar numbers or like how you can decrease the time spent on development. Can you release quicker if you make some improvements in your testing approach or QA approach? Okay, and an example of such a finding, recommendations, benefits slide. It's a little bit lot. Maybe I would do, like if I do it again, I would go with something smaller. But the idea here, again, like if it's somewhere in the back, this is not shown to the executives right away. I think it's good to go with something as long as of TLDR as it is here. But the whole idea here is you show numbers. You highlight some of those. 95% of the issues are caught on UI level. It's clear that right now testing is heavily focused on the UI. So what happens is, for example, you still have 23% of the defects in critical defects in after 2 sprints. So after a month. So this really shows that you are putting a lot of efforts into finding those defects at that stage where it is much slower to find those defects and it's much slower to fix them as well. That's why you have so many of the defects still lingering in after 2 weeks. This is and of course there are some other numbers as well here that are backing it up, but this is the story here, and you can base your recommendation on that, and you can see how much it will have. For example, a projected velocity increase. That's something that C-suites and middle management will be really happy to see if you can really get to that certain percentage of velocity increase. Because now, if developers are not coming back to those defects every time after a couple sprints, but they can find those issues much earlier in the life cycle, they spend less time on defect fixing. Same with testers. If you don't have to catch all these issues manually on UI level, then again, you're going to spend much less time. So you can spend your testing efforts on something else. Okay, let me see if there are any new questions. I don't see any new questions, so let me go back to the presentation. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please post it there in the Q&A, and I'm very happy to answer them. So I promised that I will get back to the test pyramid. So you can see from the previous example as well that, okay, it could be that there's a heavy focus on UI testing. So what happens in this case is that you find the majority of the issues on the UI level, because you might find your some of the issues with unit testing and component integration inside your own system or like subsystem. But then you don't have a way to tell what happens when you start integrating to other systems. So the only time when you catch those integration issues are basically on the UI level, or maybe sometimes rarely on the functional API level. This is what you can quickly understand just by looking at this current state test distribution. That's one thing. Second, this is a colorful, fancy, and simple diagram. So what happens is that no matter who you are talking to, is this someone who is an engineer, an architect, a manager, whatever their position they have, they will understand very quickly what you are talking about, what is the current state. And this is your goal here. Because when I was a test engineer and a test automation engineer, especially in the first couple of years, that's where I was struggling. How can I tell the current story and why I think we need a change? Usually I sent really long TLDR emails. Nobody really read through. Maybe they sent like, oh, thank you very much, like pat on the shoulder, and that's it. No action items after that. And as I started working as a consultant, I started picking up ways how I can show the current situation and why we need a change. So what happens after this is that you can show that, okay, on the left side, this is the current state. Within 6 months, it's very important, within 6 months, this is where I think we can get to. And then after that, I can tell how we can get to this situation. Again, it's clear. We have a current state that it's not ideal. We can get to another state, which may not be the nicest pyramid looking like. That's the distribution, but it's already a much better situation. And it's something that we can achieve within an achievable time frame. 6 months is not too short, but it's also not too far away. 6 months is something that people can plan ahead with. If you say 2 years or 5 years later, then I don't think people will really consider what you are going to be proposing. But for 6 months, they will start thinking about it. Then this is what's going to drive your test strategy. So again, the test pyramid is not the only approach or way that you can get to here, but it's something that I think is really easy to build and present. So this is one of the nicer ways how you can get to creating your test strategy and selling that idea to your team or to your client. And now you understand the delta. Again, let me go back here. You understand the delta. So you say that, okay, you're going to decrease the efforts in UI level because maybe there are some failing tests that nobody ever maintains. So that's just dragging you down. You start catching some of the issues on lower levels, have a better API, have full coverage on API test automation, and start finding integration issues earlier with contract testing, and maybe increase a little bit the component integration as well. Here, in the example, I'm not focusing on the unit because it's fine. Like, of course, it's not perfect, but it's fine. The bigger issue is here more in the middle level on the service levels. That's something that I wanna address first. Okay. So this is how you can start building your test strategy. This is what you're going to write down. One more thing to highlight here. This is what I like to show when I'm talking about the concept, the test pyramid concept in general. But depending on your work environment, like SDLC, the type of product or products that you are working on, the levels that you are indicating here might be very different. So an example, gaming company that I worked for almost a year ago, there we also had to add the play testing or gaming smoke testing. It's different. Or think about the performance testing as well, because for games it's quite important that okay, maybe it works for 100 people, but what happens if it's a successful game and now there are 2 million concurrent players? You don't want that to fail, because otherwise you're gonna have a lot of people uh, asking back for their money. So you have to think about all of these different aspects specifically for your team and your project. So when you are done with your analysis, you have designed like where you want to go in the future, let's say within 6 months, then you are ready to also report on your findings and what you are proposing. And typically there would be a one slider that summarizes for executives what was done, like why and who did it, and what was the approach and what you are proposing. Uh, Also, you may want to have some highlights of the findings. A couple of years ago, I used to have more findings into the face of the people that I was reporting to, but the last couple of years, I'm not as much focusing on findings, because it's not about like pointing that, hey, this is bad, that is bad, or you're failing here or failing there. First of all, I also provide some positive achievements as well for them, showing that, hey, you do some things great. But I just like to go with some highlights and focus more on what we can do. Like really show that, okay, you have some challenges on integration level, integrating to a certain system. And that's why you have so many critical issues that you are struggling to address. With this approach, you can address that very quickly. Here is a POC that we did. This proves that you are able to catch those defects earlier in the life cycle. Now all we have to do is create more test cases, maintain them, and after that we can focus on other aspects of quality too. This is how you can, and then you show them like what are the dollar values behind the savings that you get by following these approaches. If you show that to C-suites, middle management, and engineering teams, you will get the buy-in from them. That's the idea here. And before going to the last section, let me check if there are any additional questions. And I think there's one more question. Yes, usually it is. I have had a project where it wasn't, because it was it was a mainframe application or mainframe system that we were testing. So there we were not able to do contract testing. So it's really up to whether you have any two services that are communicating with each other. Do you already have a contract between the two services or not? If not, can you have a contract between the two? I mean, you should be able to. Then that means that you can introduce contract testing. How do I determine if a project can benefit from contract testing? That's one thing, but the real benefits, so how to show the benefits is, for example, there was one project where they were doing mobile testing on UI level, a little bit on API level, but struggling with that. So one thing was providing a POC on how they can do that better and more, in a more simplified way that can be maintained. But the second thing was we looked into how many services they are integrating to. So their BFF, which is not best friend forever in this case, but the backend for front end, which is basically a best friend forever, was connecting to, I think, more than 15 services, but the whole ecosystem, microservices ecosystem underlying, was consisting of like more than 150 different services. So most of the issues, after looking at the defect reports, we saw that most of the issues were coming from those underlying microservices. And we calculated how much time they are spending on root cause analysis, fixing those defects and retesting, and also how much later they find these issues compared to finding them with contract testing immediately. And showing those numbers are clearly showing that, okay, you can have some benefits if you implement contract testing, and this is how you can do that. Okay, next question. I can imagine a big part of this is how teams get to implement these solutions. For example, sprint after sprint for agile teams. Do you also recommend how QE can tap into the SDLC? If yes, do you have any recommended approach? Okay, so very important that many times it's actually not the QE or QA processes that really are the bottleneck. A lot of times we hear that it's the testing is bottleneck, and actually it's many times the engineering culture and SDLC. So, for example, there's a company who used to work in waterfall, they are transforming to agile, and that transformation is not working correctly. And then what happens is that everything else is going to be failing because teams are working in silos, they are trying to mimic working in agile, but they are not doing real agile, but they are also not doing real waterfall anymore. So they don't really know how to work correctly. And so how to implement these solutions? So the assessment approach itself doesn't matter like what SDLC they are focusing on, like they are using. You can still do this assessment. And of course, the strategy and approach that you are providing definitely should be tailored to the SDLC and to the company culture. Yeah, that's what I would say. And agile teams, it's again important to highlight here that usually there is not always, but many times I see that the testing is a silo, or test automation is working in a silo. Usually that's what you have to figure out if that's true to you or to the company that you are assessing. Okay, let me get back to the presentation and finish with the last slides. So when you start the assessment, you need to come up with like how you are going to approach it. Is it going to be something more formal or more informal? And B, you need to also understand what is your relationship with the stakeholders and their relationships with each other. So if they are finger pointing to each other, and when you have those different stakeholder or one-on-one calls and you start seeing that they are finger pointing to each other, make sure you don't give them reasons to throw each other under the bus. So it's again needs to be very much a data-driven approach that you're following. Okay, and lastly, it's important to be really polite. Again, like I mentioned it a couple of times, use the green language approach. Make sure that it's more, so you're not judging anybody, you are just providing the data. And ultimately, you want to make sure that they understand that you are here to help them, not to hurt them. And you are not giving them tools or weapons to hurt each other. That's also important. Make sure to build good relationships at all levels, not just the C-suites, and both in written and verbal format. You should be following these recommendations. And that would be all. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks for all the questions that you had. I think I only have a couple of seconds left, so don't know if I have any more time to answer any questions, but if you post them, I'm very happy to respond to them. You could also reach out to me at LinkedIn. I'd really like to respond to any questions you may have, and I hope that you enjoyed this session and that you are going to enjoy the rest of the Cypress Conf. Thank you very much.